A super common thing to experience as a coach is client resistance, and that's probably half the reason why you're here. You want to know, what do I do when a client is showing that they're ambivalent to change? And that's what we're going to talk about in this session, because ultimately some of the default ways that we are communicating, things that we've picked up over the years, they might actually be pushing our clients' resistance way higher than it should be. And that's what we're going to get into today. But before we dive into those specific tools and the kind of psychological needs that we want to address in our communication, I want to talk about a common mistake that I see so many coaches making. It's a natural mistake, but it's something that's definitely not going to help your clients through ambivalence. When clients are experiencing this resistance to change or ambivalence, the natural thing to do is to provide a solution. In psychology, we call this the righting reflex, okay? And it's that natural urge to jump in when somebody says something and almost put it right for them. So an example of this would be if a client says to us, "I didn't have time this week." That righting reflex comes in and we want to say, "Well, why didn't you get up earlier?" Okay? This can be really natural as a coach, but actually the important thing to realize is that when a client comes to us with a reason like that, by bringing back an excuse or giving them an example, all we're going to be doing is increasing their resistance. So the first thing we have to do is to make sure that we are not engaging in the righting reflex. The righting reflex comes from a good place. It comes from us wanting to be a good coach. The client has paid you money to be here, and if they're kind of stuck or they're ambivalent, we feel this desire to help them. Like, that's our job, right? Our job is to provide a solution for them. But ultimately, that drive to be a good coach and to kind of provide that solution is getting in the way of our client making progress. And it sounds like a weird thing, but it is going to increase their resistance and reduce their adherence. Because the ultimate thing is that the more that we insist, the more the person resists. It's like a common law, okay? It seems counterintuitive, but that's something to remember. The more that you insist, the more your clients will resist. I hope that makes sense. Now, if we shouldn't be doing the righting reflex, what is it that we should be doing? Let's jump in and have a look. You'll remember from the motivation session that there are 3 psychological needs that we need to meet in our clients in order for them to have that intrinsic motivation to do the thing that we want them to do. Now, ultimately, when it comes to our communication, we want to be need supportive, and that's what we're going to get into, because the way that we communicate can either enhance our clients' adherence, like we said, and we can kind of support their needs, or they can thwart their needs and therefore reduce their motivation and increase their resistance. So the 3 key psychological needs are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Now, autonomy is that our clients need to feel as though they have control over their journeys and they have the choice in their life. Competence is that our clients need to feel like they are capable of doing what it is that we're asking them to do, but also that it's not too easy. And finally, relatedness or belonging is that feeling that they're connected to you as a coach and those around them. So we need to keep these 3 things in mind when we're communicating with our clients, making sure that in our communication, we are being needs supportive. This is the paper that a lot of the information that I'm going to talk about comes from. So you can download this below if you want to understand even more techniques that you can use with your clients. But before we kind of get into that, I want to introduce you back to this continuum that you would have seen previously, okay? And what we're talking about here is really our communication can either be really directive, like on the left-hand side, and this is where we'll be doing things like giving advice, instructing, and this might be at times undermining those needs, or we can be more non-directive, which is when we start moving towards the right side, and we're doing things like summarizing or paraphrasing, and this is much more likely to be need supportive. And it goes back to that session we did before, which is that if we're being more directive, we see ourselves as the expert, whereas if we're being non-directive, we see ourselves more as a guide. And then here's that example there that you can press pause and have a look at, but the different ways that you can say the same thing in a directive way and a less directive way. So as we go more to the right, that's going to be more need supportive. Let's get into the specifics. Now, autonomy. So just a reminder that that's that need for a person to feel like they have control and choice over their life. What does this look like in terms of our communication with our clients and what we're doing with our clients? Well, there's a few things here to keep in mind, okay? The first one is that in our communication, we need to be avoiding using controlling language. These are things like the words should, need, and must. We almost don't need those words in our vocabulary at all when it's with our clients, because if we're telling them that they should do something or they need to do it or they must do something, that has that sense of control around it, which is the opposite of being autonomous. okay? If you want a reminder of this in more detail, jump back to that motivation session and it's going to be in there. Another way, based on that paper I showed you, to enhance autonomy is to explore their perspectives. Find out what do they care about, what's important to them, and as much as you can, kind of bring their ideas into the coaching. The third one, and this one's really important, is that before we start kind of providing solutions, that writing reflex again, just asking the client permission. So that would look like this. Hey, do you mind if I give you some advice here? Already, the client gets to say yes or no, and that provides that sense of autonomy, and then they can opt in to receiving the solution, which is going to be far less likely to increase resistance. Another thing we can do, it seems quite obvious, right, is to understand what's important to them. So rather than us telling them, right, you need to be doing a front squat, you need to be eating this much protein, really, let's ask them, okay, what's important to you? What are your goals? Okay, how do you want to get to those goals? And then the final thing, and the easiest thing really, that we can just introduce straight away, is that we want to provide choice. So that looks like, would you prefer to do a front squat or a leg extension? Okay, would you prefer to track your calories or track your macros? Whatever it is, just providing our clients with some choice will give them that perception of autonomy. Let's go through some specific examples. Instead of saying something like, you should start eating more protein, something that is more autonomy supportive might look like this. Would you mind if I gave you advice? So that's that permission asking. And then, how would you feel about increasing protein, as it may help you with your cravings? So what we're doing there is we're asking permission, we're asking them how they would feel about it, and we're actually giving a reason. We're providing some rationale that might align with their goals. So if they've already told us that they're struggling with cravings, that might be a nice way to kind of frame that conversation. Another thing that we might currently be saying is, I know you're not a fan of squats, but they're really important if you want to get stronger. Again, this isn't a terrible thing to say, but if we want to make it even more needs supportive, we might reframe it something like this. Would you prefer leg extensions, leg press, or squats? Okay, so that's that choice there. We're giving them a pre-selected menu. They get to decide which one it is, and that's going to reduce the resistance there and likely to increase their adherence as well. The final example we have for autonomy is, you missed hitting your step target again this week. We really need to make sure we're getting at it this week. Okay, I'm sure we've all said that, but something that might be a bit more autonomy supportive would be, what's your thoughts on your step target? Is there a target you'd prefer, or what is it that you want to aim for? Okay, so that's that idea of bringing in their preference and taking in our clients' considerations when we're working with them. The next psychological need that we want to meet when we're communicating with our clients is that need for competence. So just a reminder, our clients have to feel like they're capable of doing what it is that we're asking them to do. The way that we do this through our communication, through our coaching, is that we have to provide the optimal challenge level. So we have to keep constantly checking in, right? Is this too difficult for them? It might be too difficult if they keep not doing it for a few weeks in a row, okay? So is it too difficult, or is it super easy that they're just over-adhering almost? The next thing that we can do to increase competence is to clarify expectations. So making it really clear what you're expecting from them, but also what they can expect from what it is that they're doing. So if they are, for example, going to the gym regularly and they're eating in a particular way and they expect that that's going to lead to rapid weight loss, that might create a reduction in motivation, and that might be where some of the resistance is coming in your conversations with clients. However, if we're super clear on the expectations, that's going to allow them to feel more confident and more competent. Another thing, so like I said, we need to address obstacles, because ultimately, if we just leave the obstacles, we're not actually going to help coach our clients through what's going on for them. So that's really important. And then the final thing is called action planning, or basically helping our clients to create a clear action plan of the week ahead. So rather than just saying to our clients, okay, yeah, great, you're going to reduce your calories this week, or you're going to do 10,000 steps. It's, right, well, how are you going to do 10,000 steps? If your client's currently at 8,000 steps, then what does that look like? Okay, so how are you going to add more steps in your day? Will it be a morning walk? Will it be after your lunch? So having those conversations with clients, and once they have that plan, it's going to make them feel competent. It's going to make them feel that they're actually going to follow through with what it is that you've asked them to do. Okay, so for example, if the client wants to hit the gym 4 times per week, but they haven't yet developed the consistency, this is a good chance for us to shift our kind of approach. And we might end up doing something like this instead. Hey, I love that you're aiming for 4 sessions. It really shows how much you care about this process. I've noticed that you found it challenging hitting 3 sessions before. So would it work if we had a range of sessions, like 2 to 4 to hit? That way, when you're feeling extra motivated, you can hit 4, but when life gets in the way, 2 sessions is great. How does that sound? Okay, so here, what we're doing is if a client says to us that they want to do 4, but we're thinking that maybe they're not competent enough, we're not just undermining that competence by just saying to them no. Here's a nice way of putting it that's going to make them feel really motivated, super excited, and it's going to reduce that resistance. Maybe a client hasn't met their nutrition goals for quite a few weeks and you want to bring it up with them. So you might say something like, hey, let's really try to focus on the nutrition this week and dial it in because ultimately you're not going to get to where you want to unless you work on this. Again, that's an okay thing to say. That might work with some clients, but a better way to say it is something like this. Would it be okay if we chat about the nutrition? I know that losing weight is really important to you and you seem to be struggling with your nutrition. These are already better ways to approach the conversation. And then a few more examples here. What do you think is getting in the way? How do you think you might overcome this? Is there anything I can do to support? So can you see how all of these are actually increasing the client's competence because they're going to give answers which are going to make them feel really confident in their ability to follow through. I mean, not only that, you also notice that this is going to increase their autonomy as well. So a lot of these do overlap and that's why it's so powerful. And there's another one there. Okay, so talk me through how you're going to achieve that specifically. That's that action planning and barrier and that obstacle thing that we were talking about before. Okay, now the final psychological thing that we need to keep in mind is relatedness. And this is that idea that the client needs to feel a sense of belonging, they need to feel connected to us, and that is super important. Now, the communication that we have and the way that we communicate with our clients is an amazing way to either increase relatedness or undermine it. So here are some of the things that we want to be doing in our conversation that's going to make sure that we can have that strong relatedness. The first one is to show unconditional positive regard. And effectively what this is that even when clients are doing well and they're super adherent or they're not being adherent, we're still bringing up the same kind of things that we would do. We were still showing up with that kind of same attitude. We're still not judging them regardless of what they're doing. And this is what that unconditional positive regard is. It's showing them that we value them as a human regardless of whether they're being adherent or not. The second thing we can do is to encourage them to ask lots of questions so they feel part of the process. They can see that you care about them. And then it goes without saying, right, that genuine interest. If our clients know that we are genuinely interested in them, that's going to reduce that resistance. It's going to make them more motivated. And then finally, another thing to do is make sure that we acknowledge their feelings. I saw a really great example of this on Instagram the other day where a coach was saying about how a client is anxious about going to the gym in case they get another injury. And the coach was basically saying, but what's worse, the fear of an injury or how it feels like to be out of shape? Now, I understand what that coach was doing, but the problem with that is that you're not actually acknowledging that person's feelings. That person is scared and they're anxious. And so unless you actually acknowledge that, you're not going to help them to move forward. Okay, so making sure that when we're communicating with our clients, we're acknowledging first and foremost how they feel about something. So that wraps up that session. What I'd encourage you to do now is moving forward in your voice notes with your clients, your messages, whether it be on calls, Loom videos, just to carry these principles with you. So trying to have that need-supportive communication, making sure that we are supporting their autonomy, their competence, and that sense of relatedness. You're going to notice that over time, that clients are going to have less resistance to you when you take this approach, and also that it's going to enhance their motivation. I'll see you in the next lesson.